YouTube friends, what is going on? David Lee back, brand new video. Today we are reviewing the Sony FX9. Not only that, but providing you with my 4 key takeaways with why I purchased the Sony FX9 and maybe it makes sense for you to purchase the Sony FX9 as your next primary production camera. The first reason why I purchased the Sony FX9 was basically I needed an upgrade from the Sony FS7, right? And in 2021, the FS7 is still a camera that is being rented out on numerous productions, everything from corporate to branded content to web stuff, right? Online content, documentary, reality TV, right? It's a camera that has been used for the past like 6 years, right? And in 2021, again, still being used. But I wanted something to sort of future-proof the current demand that I have with the Sony FS7, right? And the most logical thing was the Sony FX9. From the image quality to high frame rates, to being native full frame and having a 6K downsample to a 4K image, having a Super 35 mode, right, built-in XLRs, built-in variable ND, and as the FS7 was a very popular camera for the types of shoots that I normally get hired for, documentary, branded content, and also corporate work, the FX9 was sort of that camera, it is that camera that looking forward for the next 5-6 years, I can say that, okay, I can own this camera for the next 5-6 years and I'm going to be able to make my money back, right? Make a return on my investment and also have a camera that I know is going to be sort of like industry standard in the way that the FS7 was and still is. Now moving on to actually points number 2 and number 3 of why I purchased the Sony FX9. These are probably like the 2 main ones, right, out of all the multitude of reasons that you could buy an FX9, right? But the first one is having a native full frame sensor, but also the option to go into a Super 35 mode. Now that isn't anything new, right? Sony's been doing that since I think the A7S Mark II did that. I know for sure the A7R Mark II did that because I own that camera, right? It was if you shoot in 4K on the A7R Mark II, it was a 5K sensor that downsampled to 4K, right? So you're getting a lot of detail in 4K, but it also had the option of going into a Super 35 mode, right? That's great in regards to say you're shooting a documentary, right? You have a 24-70 Canon or something like that. Sometimes it's nice when you just need a little bit more reach, right? But you don't want to switch out to like a 24-105, for instance. The great thing about the FX9 though is that you're still getting a 1-to-1 readout in Super 35 mode, right? Meaning that you're still getting the full width and height and diagonal of the sensor when you're going into Super 35 mode, so you're not losing really any detail. Now, how does that complement me as a cinematographer, right? I own full frame lenses and also own Super 35 lenses. There are certain rentals where, say, we want to use older lenses that really were meant for Super 35. So instead of having to, crop the image in full frame mode, you can just use Super 35 mode and you're still getting an amazing image at that point. Lenses like the Sigma 1835, Super 35, the 50-100, the Tokina lenses are Super 35, like the zoom lenses. Maybe if you're going for like the Fujinon MK, right, Super 35. Some of the older Canon lenses are Super 35, the zoom lenses. The DZO picture zooms, right, those are all Super 35. And for times where, say, you want to use a prime lens in full frame, but you don't want to switch out a lens, you can go into Super 35. It takes you just a couple of seconds and you're getting that extra reach that you normally would need from, say, like a Super 35 zoom lens. Now, as of this recording, Sony hasn't released their new version 3 firmware update, which allows you to assign a button on the camera to go into a center scan mode or Super 35 mode. Right now, you have to go through the menus, you have to go into like the project settings, then you have to go into here and here and here, and then switch the camera from full frame 6K or, full frame 5K crop to Super 35. Doesn't take too long. You don't have to restart the camera or anything like that, but it is a couple of extra seconds that you wish you could save from just having one click of a button. Here we go. So right now we are testing out the touch tracking on the FX9 with the viewfinder. Before you couldn't do it. You had to use like the joystick or use a predetermined area through the menu system, but now you can actually touch. I know you can't see the actual viewfinder, but if I touch to the right, you can see the box moving, hopefully. If I touch back to my red, focus there. If I touch to the chair, if I touch to the plant in the background, maybe there. Okay, and then we go back. All right, so right now I'm using the viewfinder, which again, like this isn't anything new if you're coming from like an FX3, A7S3, A7 III, stuff like that, right? Those cameras already have the touch tracking capabilities. But the FX9 now has this, and hopefully the FX6 will have it soon with the firmware update. So again, this is the touch tracking that they added to the FX9. Now the main new feature that I wanted was basically the center scan mode to a assignable button, right? So if I go to projects, if I scroll down, my camera is recording right now, but if I go to assignable button, I have assignable button number 8 to crop select. All right, so now this is the first time me doing this. I don't know if it'll actually do it while I'm recording. If it does, that would be awesome. So right now this is full frame 6K mode, as you can see from the top right corner-ish. If I hit 8, I don't know if it'll do anything or not. Cannot proceed while recording. Okay. So right now I basically just pressed the number 8 assignable button and it automatically went into the full frame 5K crop mode. And then if I click the button again, I have to stop recording, but if I click the button again, and now I am in Super 35 4K mode. So basically you can easily just go into 5K crop, 4K crop, and instantly, like as soon as you press the button, it'll automatically change to that. It isn't like, your monitor won't flicker on and flicker out. It won't black out or anything like that. It'll automatically just switch it. I will say though that it's sort of just like a sorting button though, right? Like you can't assign it to automatically go into 4K Super 35 or automatically go into full frame 5K crop. You have to, cycle through the only 3 options, right? 6K full frame, 5K full frame crop, and then Super 35 4K. And it happens instantly, right? So that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. Apologies if the white balance is changing. I have the windows open and the sun, like it is doing right now, the sun is coming in and out. There is probably broken sky outside. So, but I'm pretty sure this is gonna be a long, nice video. So that being said, thank you for continuing to watch this video, no matter the length of it, but just to be aware that the weather is changing, all that kind of good stuff. Reason number three of why I purchased the FX9 was very similar to why I purchased, one of the reasons why I purchased the FS7 was having little or no crop when you're going into high frame rate modes. High frame rate modes. Now I will say this, the FS7, when you are shooting in 4K DCI or 4K UHD, you can go into, you can shoot 60 frames per second with absolutely no crop on the sensor. Now the reason being is because it is a Super 35 millimeter sensor, right? If you use a speed booster, then you're getting full frame. But the thing with the FS7 is you need that speed booster if you want full frame. With the FX9, it's native full frame. And so you can go back and forth between full frame and Super 35. Now that being said, if you want 4K 60, whether you're shooting in 4K DCI or 4K UHD, you need to go into their new full frame 5K crop, right? Which does crop in on the sensor ever so slightly. It's not a huge amount, which is great. It's not even close to 1.5. It's a little bit less than that. So again, it's a bit of a trade-off. Not that bad in my experience. And you're not getting like any kind of like, crazy moire or aliasing, stuff like that when you go into the 5K. I wouldn't say it's like, nitpicking things, but obviously, if you have a 6K sensor and then you're cropping in like 5K, you are losing a little bit when it comes to field of view, maybe a little bit when it comes to detail, but it's very negligible. Now the 120, the 180 that the camera can do, it isn't 4K, right? But it is 2K, which is still more than what the FS7 could do. The FS7 was limited to 1080. In the FX9, it is 2K, but it is full frame, right? So it still is using the full width of the sensor. It isn't downsampled though, so you're not getting like 6K to 2K, if that makes any sense, right? It is using the full width of the sensor, but it just can't do it at the full resolution, right? So it is giving you a 2K output. But again, field of view, same thing if you're in full frame. The camera can also do it in Super 35 mode, but that one is actually cropping in onto the sensor. So it's usable, but at that point it's like you might as well just use, if you can, you might as well just use the 2K full frame. The main reason why I would avoid shooting the 2K Super 35 high frame rate is, if you're shooting something that's very low light, if you're shooting something where you can't control the dynamic range or you can't control your ratios, if there's multicolored lights, low light, right, stuff like that, I would probably avoid shooting the high frame rate in the 2K Super 35 mode. The reason number 4, which is the last reason, is having a versatile camera system, right? Very much like the FS7. Unfortunately, I feel like with the FS7, with the FX9, even the FX3 and FX6, right? It's it kind of has this like lineage, right, which is good and bad, of being a great documentary camera, being a great event camera, broadcast camera, sports, live coverage, things like that, right? And that's really where the FS7 shined, right? Is that camera was used on so many shows when it came to documentary, reality TV, broadcast news, journalism, things like that, right? But it was also an amazing camera when it came to narrative films, right? It was an amazing camera when it came to doing commercials, but not many people use it in that regard, right? It was such a small group of people that were using the FS7 in a higher production value, in a more cinematic storytelling way. People like Mark Bone, right, who shot amazing documentaries like Rescate, or No Country is an Island, or even look at some of his commercial work, right? Shot on the FS7, like it looked amazing. But he was like 1% of the people who were using the FS7 in not its normal environment. And same thing with the FX9 right now. If you look at the FX9 where it's being rented or where it's being requested, it's like reality TV, it's documentary, it's live events, right? Sports coverage, things that the FS7 was known for. But the FX9 has a lot of untapped potential, right? You can use it on narrative films and you can use it successfully. I took 2 short films this year that were shot on the FX9 at international and local film festivals, right? My short film Heart, I won Best Micro Short Film at the Eastern European International Movie Awards, right? Shot on the FX9. I made it to the finalist round at the Cannes World Film Festival and also was nominated for Best Cinematography, right? Again, shot on the FX9. My short film The Park, I won Best Indie Short Film at the Las Vegas Independent Film Festival, shot on the FX9. I won at the Toronto Independent Film Festival for Best Micro Short Film, again, shot on the FX9, right? So there's a lot of untapped potential from the FX9 that I hope in the future, the next year, 2 or 3 years, people will start to see the FX9 as a great alternative if, say, you can't afford a rental for like a Sony Venice or the new Sony Venice 2. But if you needed a camera, right, that can basically tick all the boxes. You need a camera that can do live events, that can do sports coverage, that can do narrative short films or indie feature films, that can do music videos, that can do corporate work, right? It could be like client testimonials. It could be commercial work, right? It could be product stuff. A camera that can do all that is very, very hard to find in that $10,000 range, right? I would say at the end of the day, once you actually build out your FX9 kit, it'll probably cost around like $14,000, $15,000, right? But normally those types of cameras, you either have to have multiple cameras, right? You have like, say, a Alexa Mini LF that can do, one thing, and you have like an FX9 that can do other things, right? If you just can only afford one camera, right? What would that camera be? And I think for me, that would be the FX9, right? Not to mention all the other features, right? The variable ND, right? You have everything from 2 stops to 7 stops of ND in the camera, and variable at that point, right? It can make you faster on set. You don't necessarily need to always carry filtration in front of the lens, right? Again, if you use matte boxes or not, you have at least 7 stops of ND that you can variably tune in. You have 2 XLRs, right? Again, having built-in XLRs is just like, it's just a given, right? It's just so nice having 2 built-in XLRs. I'm not talking about, okay, now I have to use a specific top handle built into the camera or built on top of the camera, and I need to have that handle in order to get XLRs, right? No, like the camera has 2 built-in XLRs. You have a major upgrade from the FS7 where that camera didn't have time code or gen lock, but the FX9 has time code, it has gen lock. The camera still uses XQD cards, right? So if you're coming from an FS7, you probably have, 7, 8, or 10 of them, right? XQD cards, again, still are a little bit pricey. They're not as pricey as, say, CFast cards or the CF Express cards. But an XQD card is something that you can buy like anywhere, right? If you have a travel gig, you're going to like Indonesia or Singapore or Central America, right? I'm pretty sure you can find a freaking XQD card just like an SD card. Now, last but not least, who is the FX9 for? I think we've touched upon many reasons or many choices of why you would choose the FX9 depending on who you are. But number one is the most obvious one, most obvious one, if I can speak English, is current FS7 owners who are looking to upgrade, right? You're looking at, say, other cameras, but it just makes sense for you to have the FX9 based upon your use and based upon the work that you have with the FS7, right? If that's the case, go with the FX9. For production companies, regardless of size, if you're a production company that is a Sony work, that is a Sony house, right? Meaning you have like an A7S III, maybe you already have a couple of FS7s, you have a couple of FS5s, you maybe just purchased like an FX3, and you're looking to have like a replacement for the FS7, but stay within the Sony range, right? It makes sense at that point. Instead of transitioning to brand new camera systems, just go with the FX9, right? You're gonna get everything that you could ever ask for from Sony cameras in that regard, that you already are a Sony house. Now the tricky part, right? If you are someone who's looking at, say, a C500 Mark II, a C300 Mark II, Ursa Mini Pro G2, or maybe even a Red Komodo package, right? That's sort of a hard part, right? It's like, which one do I go with? Do I go with Canon? Do I go with Red? Do I stick with Sony? Do I go with Blackmagic, right? I think the easiest thing, right, and the most logical thing for me is another reason why again I purchased the FX9 was I also own a Sony A7 Mark III, which I use as like a B cam for interviews, for gimbal stuff, or overhead rigs, right? Something where I just need a small camera package. I already own a smaller camera, a smaller Sony camera. So it made sense for me to, you know, like instead of wanting to go with buying a Canon R5 or something like that, it's like, well, I already have a Sony A7 III. It gets the job done for those certain things. Let's stick with Sony, right? Let's get the FX9. So if you're in the boat where you already own, like, say, a Canon R5, R6, maybe it's a 5D Mark IV, something older, right? Or maybe you own like a C300 Mark I or C300 Mark II. At that point, you know, go with the Canon option, right? Go with the C300 Mark III, go with the C500 Mark II. If you already own a Blackmagic pocket camera, like a Pocket 4K, a Pocket 6K, don't get the FX9, right? Just go with the Ursa Mini G2. It's super affordable, right? It's like $6,000. You could probably find a pretty good one in good condition used off eBay or Craigslist, right? Search around, but again, if you already own a pocket camera, just get the G2. Now, if you do like 100% fast action, sports, wildlife, like Nat Geo kind of stuff, if you do a lot of like cars, car events or car commercials, anything that requires fast speed that a global shutter would be more beneficial to you, I would say at that point, spend the money and get the Red Komodo. Because the Red Komodo package is still gonna cost you like, you know, $10,000, $11,000, right? Same price as the FX9. Yeah, this is gonna be a long video. I'm already at 20 minutes. Obviously, there's some pauses in between there, but it's gonna be a long video. That being said, friends, I hope this video helped you out in some way, shape, or form to better inform you of your purchasing decision, right? Regardless if you end up going with a Canon C300 III or a Canon C70 or a Red Gemini or whatever camera, right? Maybe you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna spend $100,000, get an Alexa Mini LF, right? You are balling at that point. But regardless of what it is, right, this video, I really wanted to provide you with all the ins and outs, all the pros, all the cons of why I purchased the FX9, things that I like about it, things that I don't necessarily like about it. But at the end of the day, it made sense for me for a business use, right? A business use, but also a brand use, right? Because again, right, I spent money to create my short films this year. I didn't make any money off of them, but the recognition and also the award status, right, is going to help me in the future when it comes to different projects, future projects where I need to be hired on as a director, or for that time when my first feature film comes out, right? I already have these the recognition and the awards to say, hey, I made these movies that won at film festivals, right? That won best indie short film, best micro short film, right? Best short film, whatever it was, right? Using an FX9. It just goes to show you that the sensors are so good these days, right? No matter what camera you're on, the sensors are so good these days. At the end of the day, it's about you as a cinematographer. It's about you as a DP. It's how you see the world. It's how you see things through your own lens, how you light things, how you tell stories through camera movement, through blocking, right? All the things that really make a good storytelling, right? It isn't the camera. The camera is just a tool. Lenses, they're just tools. Some tools are better than other tools, for sure, right? Some tools have a certain aesthetic or a certain characteristic compared to other tools, yes. But if you don't know how to use those tools, then, you know, it doesn't really make any sense for you to purchase a $100,000 camera or a $10,000 camera. But if you are in this situation where it makes sense for you to purchase the FX9 or a similar camera, spend $10,000, $15,000 on a camera system, I hope this video helped you out in that regard. If you liked the video, leave it a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel as always, just so you're notified. Actually, this is probably the second to last video I will be making ever on YouTube, so subscribe if you want, right? It doesn't really matter. Subscribe if you want. And my friends, every day you have an opportunity to create your experience and to write and tell your own story. My name is David Lee. I will catch you guys in the next and last video.